I'm John Dennis. I'm running against Nancy Pelosi.
We have the most beautiful state and one of the most beautiful places in the world, and people are leaving.
I'm gonna catch you when all the cameras aren't around, and I'm gonna you up. I'll try it.
He's the chairman of the San Francisco GOP, and he's running against House Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
Step back, everyone.
All right, welcome to the John Dennis Report here on April 15th, 2021. Thanks for joining us. Please make sure to subscribe at the John Dennis Report on YouTube, John Dennis Report on YouTube, and John Dennis Report on Facebook. And then at Real John Dennis is the handle on both Twitter and on Instagram at Real John Dennis. And if you've been following us on YouTube, you'll see that there's some new little content we're calling John Dennis JDR Quick Hits, and make sure to subscribe and you'll get updated on those as they come out. So come on in. We're going to talk about a couple of different topics today. The most pressing one, the one that's been at the top of the news, I suppose, is the case in Minnesota, and it appears that the prosecution has rested. I think final arguments have been made. Deliberations start on Monday. It also appears that the jury is going to be sequestered. And heard different things. I haven't followed it super closely, but I followed it closely enough. It sounded like in the beginning the defense was crushing the prosecution, that in fact the prosecution witnesses ended up testifying that in a way that sort of strengthened the not guilty case. They effectively became defense witnesses, if you will. And now apparently the prosecution rallied later in the case and presented some more evidence that seemed to indicate, for example, that Mr. Chauvin, Officer Chauvin, was guilty. But we'll see. I mean, I think really we're at a stage now we are in a really dangerous moment in that, the facts and circumstances of the case are almost, or I want to say irrelevant, but a lot less relevant because you have so many external factors. So let me bring this up. I just want to bring this up real quickly. Actually, I'll come back to let me come back to that point in a minute. So here we have. Okay, actually, let me start with this. So, is this up on the screen? This tweet. Okay, great. So I had this little exchange with Jack Posobiec. For those of you don't know, Jack's this former military guy, sort of a Washington insider. And has, what does he have now? 1.2 million followers. He posted that earlier in the day, prosecution rests, jury will begin deliberations Monday, they will be sequestered. And I asked him what his guess was on the verdict because he has been following this closely. He's also a correspondent for One American News Network and has been on the case quite a bit. And so I said, what's your verdict? And he said, all along I've said either hung jury or some balancing attempt. And this is where it gets a little odd, where I'm saying that the facts have become less relevant. Look, there are always external influences on cases. Some of them are minuscule external influences, but some of them are pretty substantial. And this is something that Jack brings up. The jurors are literally commuting through riots into the courtroom. You can't overlook that. And so what does he mean by that? Well, what he means is that that sort of justifies the second half of his sentence above that, or some balancing attempt. In other words, convict him of Chauvin of some lesser charge, like, I don't know. They may go after him for violation of civil rights. I don't know if they can do that in this trial, but maybe they'll try and, work down to some other negligence or something like homicidal negligence or something like that, some lesser charge. So we'll see. I mean, that's where we're at. It'll be interesting to see how long the deliberations go. But in the meantime, we have nights going on, another night of protests and damage and violence in Minneapolis. There's a couple of interesting things to note about this. One is that you're having sympathy riots and protests/riots and property damage in Portland. I was expecting to see some additional ones. Actually, there were some protests in
I'm John Dennis.
protests in New York, apparently. But I was expecting to see more robust stuff happening, but apparently there haven't. Let's stand by, because we will see some sort of reaction across the country, in cities across the country, because when this verdict comes down. But it's interesting that there has we have effectively built up this sort of riot network. I mentioned this I think yesterday in the stream, or the day before, that we've got this sort of riot network now. In fact, I made a joke earlier on Twitter that we should start a new cable channel called RTN, the Riot Television News. So, to cover these people going nuts, because no one seems to wants to stop them, except we got to this headline today. And this headline shows that 24 arrested in fourth night of protests over Daunte Wright shooting in Minnesota. Now, maybe I missed it, or maybe there were arrests happening before, but to me this is sort of a new development in that during the riots last summer, I don't recall the police arresting anyone, really. I mean, we saw unconscionable acts of cruelty, unconscionable acts of violence, arson, looting, assault, and I don't remember any arrests, really. I don't recall that, but here we have 24 arrested in fourth night protests. A couple things this tells me. One, that the people in Minneapolis are sick of it. Two, that the reason why they let those riots go on is because the Democrats thought it was going to help them politically and hurt Trump, show Trump to be weak and feckless and not strong, and I think that was a political calculation. They wanted that to go on, and now that Biden's in office, they don't want these. They know these riots are going to be on him, and they don't want this to happen. So you may see a stronger pushback, and the riots may be quelled a little bit more quickly. I mean, they're going to go on. There's going to definitely be some destruction, but you may see the municipalities, the governor calling the National Guard, that sort of thing, in order to quell these riots, because it's not a good look for the Democrats. So, in any event, it'll be interesting to see how this goes on, and we'll also be interested to see. For sure, they're going to crack down on it in Minnesota. It'll be interesting to see if they crack down on it anywhere else. Apparently, they're incapable of cracking down on these things in Portland, but it'll be interesting to see what happens there. And I think, by the way, I just want to make a quick point. People who, my father-in-law went into Portland. He lives up in Eastern Washington. For whatever reason, he had to go. It's with a friend down into Portland. Not so long ago, and he hadn't been there in a little more than a year or so, maybe 2 years. Said he couldn't believe it. Portland is a disaster. There are tents everywhere, all along the highways you drive in from eastern Washington, sort of from the Columbia River, and all along there, and then all throughout town there are tents everywhere. So I don't know, man. This is not a very good look for Portland. A few years ago, a friend of mine had a daughter who was looking at colleges, and they went up to Portland to look at a school, and cut the trip short and said that not only is she not going to go to school there, but he'll never go back to Portland, certainly not while it's in the condition it's in right now. So anyway, let's move on to the next topic. And this is another big one. And I think there's a lot of politics going on in this one. And that is, before we get on to that, did I miss this one? Yeah. By the way, just let me finish this topic real quick. Throw that up there, yeah. Police show murders skyrocketing in anti-police Democrat-run cities. Interestingly, the budget for did a post the other day. The budget for the police in Oakland has increased because people are sick of this. They realize that you can't not have a police department, and we have people like Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib saying that we have to defund the police and get rid of them and stop incarceration. I mean, she actually said no police, no incarceration. Meanwhile, she got up and got on the floor of the House and cried. By the way, she's a very violent, vicious woman who, I mean, I hate to speculate, but, okay, I'm not going to speculate, but she hasn't shown much sympathy for any of the people who were, whose businesses were destroyed, minority or otherwise, for the people who lost, who were assaulted, people who lost property, cars, whatever damage in the riots last year. But she herself, this hypocrite, got up on the floor of the House and cried because of the folks who, the trespassers on January 6th. She felt unsafe. And then at the same time turns around and says that she wants to defund the police. Does she want to defund the Capitol Police who protect her? Does she want to disarm the Capitol Police who protect her? And so, yeah, that's just another story in hypocrisy. And here we see that murder skyrocketing in anti-police Democrat-run cities. Shocked. Okay, let's move on. Let's go on to the Pelosi thing. Yeah, let me just leave that up for a second. They're passing this, this infrastructure bill. They're working their way through it, and they've thrown everything but the kitchen sink into the bill and saying that everything is infrastructure now. And so I made a little joke that Democrat donors' bank accounts are infrastructure. That's what's really happening here. Any opportunity that these guys get to loot and pay off their friends, they're going to do, because as most people know, I think about 10% of this this massive quote-unquote infrastructure bill is going towards traditional infrastructure. The rest of it is going to, to sweetheart contracts. Okay, let's go. Move on to the next thing. Got a lot of likes on that one. Okay, so here's the background on this story. It's been discussed for over a year that the people are concerned that the Democrats are going to try and quote-unquote pack the courts. Actually, it's been discussed for quite a long time. But this was one of the fears that came up during the election. And the packing of the court would be done because Trump had changed the balance of the court from sort of a 5-4-ish thing to a 6-3 conservative Republican-appointed Supreme Court. And I don't call it a conservative court just because John Roberts has been siding so frequently with the Democrats on the court. But the last, if you respect or expect the conservative roots of Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, and Amy Coney Barrett to play out, then that effectively gives, even if Roberts is considered a flip to the liberals, it gives a pretty sturdy majority to Republican-appointed judges. So the Democrats responded by saying, in the super left sites, came back and said, "Oh, we want to grow the Supreme Court. There aren't enough Supreme Court justices. Of course, they would grow them on their watch. They would grow the Supreme Court on a Democrats' watch, which would restore supremacy to the liberals on the Supreme Court. If, for example, Joe Biden did it, and they voted it in, and then Joe Biden made the additional appointments. They're talking about adding 4 more. And in fact, the Democrats introduced a bill on the floor of the House to effectively immediately grow the Supreme Court from 9 to 13 justices. Now, in the meantime, during the election, he refused to answer, and only when pressed in a friendly interview, Joe Biden said that what he would do is appoint a presidential commission that would study the issue. Now, why it needed to be studied in the first place, no one bothered to ask him. It seems like we got a fairly well-functioning Supreme Court number right now. Why it has to go from 9 to any number above that or below that, it was never discussed. There doesn't seem to be any justification for it, but he said he was going to create this commission. Meanwhile, the Democrats couldn't, in the House, couldn't wait for that commission, so they decided to instigate a bill. And interestingly, Nancy Pelosi is the one who pushed back on the House bill, and since she's in control of the legislative agenda in the House, she said she does not support packing the Supreme. Well, she didn't say that. She said she does not support bringing this bill up to pack the Supreme Court. Let's listen to what she has to say.
Bill to expand the Supreme Court by 4 seats, and would you commit to bringing that bill to the floor?
No. I support the president's commission to study such a proposal, but frankly, I'm not. Right now, we're back. Our members, our committees are working. We're building putting together the infrastructure bill and the rest. I don't know that that's a good idea or a bad idea. I think it's an idea that should be considered, and I think the president's taken the right approach to have a commission to study such a thing. It's a big step. It's not out of the question. It has been done before in the history of our country a long time ago. And the growth of our country, the size of our country, the growth of our challenges in terms of the economy, et cetera, might necessitate such a thing.
Okay. First thing, why in God's name is she wearing a mask? Can we just get that? Because it's irritating me as I'm watching this. It's completely irritating. She has been vaccinated. Presumably, the reporters in the room have been vaccinated. However, they are wearing masks. She is more than 6 feet away from them. She's been vaccinated, and yet for some reason she's wearing a mask. There's something very strange going on with that, but we'll do that as another topic another day. Well, here's what was interesting about this. Notice she didn't say that she was rejecting the idea. In fact, she was saying it's been done before, justifying it. But this is a political play. She is shooting down and establishing her well, first of all, she's showing solidarity with the president. Because if one thing that Pelosi wants to do, she knows how to do, is she wants to keep the power people in power. She doesn't want to cede the power to the quote-unquote grassroots in the Democrat Party on the floor, the lesser congressman. So if there's something that they want on the agenda, she's not going to to support it unless it goes through her. They didn't go through her, so she's not likely to support it. But this whole scheme about packing the Supreme Court, and Biden's response was crafted last year. Clearly, she was a part of that crafting. There have been some people like Scott Adams, for example, who says that the suggestion that they were going to use a presidential commission to study it means that they're going to bury it. I don't know that that's necessarily true. The commission might actually add some authority to expanding it. They really do want to expand it. And her, the way she responded to this tells me that they're actually probably going to use this commission. I'm going to disagree with Scott Adams. They're going to use this commission as an authority to expand the court while Biden is in office. So, but she is, so don't be fooled by Nancy Pelosi pushing back against the people who brought, the Democrats, that is, who brought this bill to the House floor. She just wants to be in control of the process, and she's telling them to bugger off. That's all this is about. She's not saying that she's against it. She's saying that she just wants to do it on her terms. So, and of course, needless to say, that if they were to pull this sort of a stunt, they're we could start a never-ending expansion of the Supreme Court. The next time the Republicans get in office, although maybe they never will, if the people who believe that cheating happened in 2020 are right. If the Democrats are firmly in charge of the cheating mechanisms in the country, they could expand the courts. But if they are not, and if Republicans actually take control of all three branches in the future, they could go back and expand the Supreme Court by 8 to 12 justices. And we could have 25 justices who hear cases. And it becomes, a never-ending expansion of the court, just simply as a tool of power, and also as an additional legislative branch, which wasn't intended by the founders. That's not, that wasn't the function of the court. In fact, a lot of these functions of the court were up in the air, and Marbury Madison was the one that gave the court the power to oversee legislation, the validity of legislation. So anyway, this whole thing is very, very tricky. There should be no commission. I'd feel much more comfortable if she said, no, this isn't going to happen. But we'll just have to sit back and watch this. Okay, last but not least, let's move on to the final topic here. Quickie on this one. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. James O'Keefe at Project Veritas, who we have, I mentioned yesterday, chatted with James and text with him periodically, and we had dinner at an event a couple of years ago. We sat next to each other, talked about a lot of things. But he's the real deal and is fighting the good fight. He's turning the book 1984. Which many think isn't fiction, but is actually a blueprint for the future. Turning 1984 back on the government by taking the cameras, which were in that novel, focused exclusively on the people, and focusing the cameras back on the people in power. And in this segment, I'm not going to play the whole thing. I'm just going to play a short portion of it here. There's in this segment. He talks about how CNN is using race baiting, that they, for example, are not focusing. They focus on when mass shootings, for example, are committed by white men. Don Lemon has actually said, he said it to Chris Cuomo, that white men are the biggest problem in this country. A despicable thing to say. And so whenever there's a mass shooting committed by a white man, of course, they mention the race. They show the picture of the alleged perpetrators. And now we have this situation with Asians being attacked, and it seems like I think maybe 100% of the attacks have come from black men. And of course, CNN is ignoring that because it doesn't fit into their narrative that white people and white men in particular are the big problem, as Don Lemon put it. So let me just put this. So here they have an undercover camera on a CNN technical director, again, who doesn't drive the news agenda, but he's around and can talk about it because he sees what they're doing. And so here's what he has to say. Let me get to. Yeah, let's just start right there.
I haven't seen anything about focusing on the color of people's skin that aren't white. They just aren't saying anything. You know what I mean? They're just not. All of a sudden, that story loses a little steam and they just like leave it be.
Why?
I don't know. Like you can shape an entire people's perception about anything on how you do it, right? Like,
How do we do that?
And you can watch that clip. It's on James O'Keefe's Twitter page. This is, you can see it's breaking part 3. Came out a little while ago, a little earlier today. And a couple things. I mean, people have asked a lot of questions about this and said, "Oh my God!" They've made proclamations about it, all of which were true. That this is despicable, of course, and it's it's CNN working to tear apart the country. But one of the things I haven't asked is why. Why are they doing this? What's the point? And keep in mind, by the way, CNN has been attacking Tucker Carlson, who's pointed out that the Democrats, by Democrats' own admission, is that they're trying to replace, Native American voters with non-Native American voters because they tend to vote Democrat. And Julian Castro said it. It was written in the New York Times. I think Klotkin, I think was the author's name, Joel Klotkin. So I mean, this has been a strategy. But as soon as Tucker brings it up, he gets attacked for it. And you just have to wonder if CNN isn't in on this whole scheme about the Great Replacement. If we're constantly targeting the majority of voters in this country, I think the country's still 70% white. And if you keep targeting them, it actually gives them cover and gives people reason to turn away from asking questions about the Great Replacement because the majority of this country apparently is filled with immoral people based on the color of their skin. And here's the real key here. Most important is that we again always want to point this out because the only way that we get out of this is if people reject the Democrats and what they're doing right now. And what the Democrats are doing is that they're through CNN and through their other buddies in the news media. They are just after power. That's all they care about. They just want power. They want control of. The United States. They want authority, and they'll do nothing. They'll stop at nothing to get it. Just one thing that they all have in common: from Pelosi to Rashida Tlaib, from AOC to what's his name, Tim Kaine. They all want power. That's it. That's what they want, and that's what they're constantly going to fight for. And that's why they have CNN on this assignment to vilify a certain segment of America, that vilify that segment of America based on immutable characteristics. It's a despicable topic. I hate talking about it, but they are really forcing us to address it, lest we actually let them get away with what they're trying to perpetrate. So, anyway, I hate to end on that kind of a funky note, but that is the John Dennis Report today. Again, follow us at Real John Dennis on both Twitter and Instagram, and then of course, please subscribe at Real John Dennis on YouTube. That is our primary platform these days. And if you have any questions, reach out to me through Twitter or one of these social media sites, and we'll try and answer them. And if you have any suggestions for topics you'd like to see us cover, go ahead and put those on any of our social media platforms. We'll take a look and see if we can give it a run. But until our next show, have a great weekend. I hope you spend it with people you care about and doing things that you like to do and enjoying life. So until then, see you next time.